Hello and welcome to another episode of the Student Loan Planner Podcast. It's Travis, and today we're going to talk about what, if anything, should you be doing with your student loans right now. There's all this, uncertainty, all these concerns, questions, fears, anxieties about what's happening at the moment with student loans. And what do you do when there's still all this chaos and this big save plan pause? What can you actually believe right now? So that'd be a really good opportunity to turn to our listener voicemail line to see what people are leaving question-wise about that. And so I thought we would take our first question about somebody who's wondering if they should switch to the pay plan or not. So let's take a listen.
Hello, I wanted to ask you if I am qualified to be on the PAYE pay plan. I was on the old IBR for a long time, and then I consolidated my loans in 2023 to qualify for the SAFE plan. I am currently on the SAFE plan forbearance. But I was thinking about moving from save to pay because if I move to the pay plan, my years of payment would go down by 5 years. I would be making less payments on the pay plan. But my problem is my student loans go to 2001, 2002, 2003. So that's when I went to college. So my loans are older than 2007. I have been calling Nelnet to figure this out, but they're giving me conflicting information. Some of them told me that because my loans are older than 2007, they're from 2002, 2003, and so forth, that even though I consolidated my loans in 2023, I still do not qualify for the pay plan. And some other reps in Nelnet told me I do qualify. And they said that when you consolidate your loans, you are as if you were born again and you become a new borrower. So I wanted to ask you, do I does someone become eligible for pay plan if they consolidated their loans, even though they have older loans from 2001, 2002, 2003, and so forth? And would you recommend me switching from safe plan to pay plan? Would pay plan be a better option for a graduate student like me who makes about $145,000 a year? And so, yeah, please do an episode on this. Thank you for your time. Thank you. Bye bye.
So that's a good question. And I think that if you think about what the definition of being eligible for pay is, you have to be a new borrower as of October 2007 and have taken out at least one loan after October 2011. So the second part of this borrower situation is true. If you consolidate a loan after 2011, that does count as a new loan. So you would satisfy that condition. But where this borrower does not satisfy the other condition is being a new borrower as of October 2007. Now, to be clear, if you have paid off your loans and you take out a new loan and you didn't have a loan outstanding when you became a new borrower after 2007, then this person would have been eligible. So, for example, if they had paid off their undergrad loans from 2001 to 2003 or 4 before taking out their first loan after that October 2007 date, then they would be eligible for pay as you were. And so that's kind of where it gets complicated. Somebody can be eligible for pay if they pay off old loans and then take out a new loan for the first time. But this person didn't do that, so that's why they're not eligible for pay as you earn. So what does that mean functionally? So remember that pay as you earn was essentially a strategy to implement the new IBR program that President Obama crafted through the legislation and the Affordable Care Act to get it opened up early to borrowers. This was all part of the plan for, new IBR was supposed to be eligible for new borrowers as of July 2014. That was part of the ACA. Partly because of just budgetary reasons, they needed a lot of these provisions to take effect after a certain date so the cost would be low enough for them to pass the law. And, the problem is that bill, when you pass a bill that doesn't have benefits for many years from now, it doesn't get you much of a political payoff. So think about like the Inflation Reduction Act. One of the big political criticisms of that law was that it was this big deal that was signed by President Biden, and it was just this uh, big legislative victory. But then the average voter didn't really feel any impact because most of the money is not going to be spent for a long time. Most of the benefits are not going to be received for a long time. So the idea behind Pay As You Earn was to try to get it out there early in the 2012 election. President Obama gave a speech to University of Iowa graduating class and basically announced the pay plan. And it would have been pretty awkward if that graduating class had not been eligible for the plan that he was announcing, right? And so that's actually why they crafted the plan to be available to new borrowers as of October 2007, was because the vast majority of the people in that University of Iowa graduating class, in class of 2012, took out their first student loan in 2008. And so they needed the majority of these students to be eligible for this new income-driven plan. Otherwise, that would be kind of an awkward speech to give because you'd be announcing something that didn't pertain to the audience that you're giving the speech in front of. So that's a little bit of fun history about how the pay plan came into being. And it was the first plan that was ever derived from something called the ICR statute, the ICR authority of the Department of Ed. So let's take a listen to some more questions now.
Hi, good afternoon, Travis. I would like to thank you for listening to my voicemail. I've been a long time listener. I have a question. So I'm currently in the SAVE plan. I have about 9 payments or so that did not count due to me being in the SAVE plan and it being on administrative forbearance. My question is, should I go ahead and just wait um, until to see what the new administration is going to do, or should I try to change into a new IDR? I did take my first loan out before 2007. So I took my first loan out in 2004 for undergrad. So I don't believe I will qualify for the paid plan. So I'm assuming the only one that I would probably qualify for is the IBR. So just wanted to know your advice or guidance on should I just wait it out or should I go ahead and change? Like I said, I have about 9 payments that is not counting on the SAVE plan, and I am in PSLF. I have maybe about 3 years or so out from PSLF. It keeps pushing me back the date because of the payments not counting, but I am still sitting in my ECF forms. All right, thank you. Bye.
So for this question, I think that the answer is it depends, which is never a good answer, but let me explain why it depends. So if you have a low risk tolerance, let's say you have a very low risk tolerance and you really desperately want to be out of your job as soon as possible, well, then I would definitely say try to switch so you can be done for sure as soon as possible. So IBR is statutory, it's in the law, PSLF is in the law. So IBR plus PSLF is sure to work as anything. I can't give you 100% probability, but I would say maybe 98, 99% probability. The PSLF buyback program, maybe that's like a 2/3 chance to work. And so if you think about what PSLF buyback is, it's essentially the opportunity to think of all of these paused payments as counting, but you just have to make it up later. And you have to make it up when you have 120 months of total qualifying employment. So the big thing to do is to be, certifying your employment, making sure that the Department of Ed knows about all your qualifying employment first and foremost. And then when you hit 120 months of total qualifying employment, then go ahead and submit for PSLF saying that you believe you qualify, submit a reconsideration request, and try to see if you can buy back those months that didn't count. Now, in terms of if you should apply right now, I think that the issue is, what does your future hold? Like, would you have a hard time qualifying for IBR in the future? Would it be difficult for you to get a partial financial hardship, which means, your required payment on IBR would have to be lower than the standard 10-year plans for you to even be able to sign up for the plan at all? So I'm actually seeing quite a few people who are at risk of this because they're only eligible for the old IBR plan, and they need to have a payment on IBR that's lower than their standard 10-year plan, or they can't get onto IBR at all. Well, if ICR is struck down as a legitimate plan, which is very possible, then the IBR plan would be the only game in town. And then, if you did not have that partial financial hardship to get onto IBR, then you'd be up the creek without a paddle because you'd have no route to get PSLF at all. Now, this is assuming the ICR plans get restricted by the courts. I can't make a prediction on that. I'm not really sure which way they're going to go on that. But we know the IBR plan is safe. So I think that, the way I would look at it is if you're sure that you're going to have a partial financial hardship no matter what, if you're sure that you're going to stay in your nonprofit or government employment no matter what, then I think that I might be patient and just sort of wait it out, because you'll be able to switch onto the IBR plan later, pretty easily if you needed to. They can't block you from signing up for IBR. So in that case, I'd probably be a little patient. If I was a, first or second year attending physician, my income is about to skyrocket. I have a low tax return that I could use to get onto the IVR plan right now, and I'm not sure if the pay plan is going to stick around for 2 or 3 more years that I would need to get PSLF. In that case, I probably would give up my administrative forbearance, try to apply for IBR to get onto it, so that when my attending income is too high to qualify for IBR, at least I know I'll have the capped standard 10-year plan payment. And then you're, kind of locking in the ability to get the vast majority of your loans forgiven versus potentially taking a risk of not getting anything forgiven at all. So those are some of the, kind of examples of why this is kind of a very personal situation. You really do have to think about, your income, your future income, your spouse's income, your filing status, how close you are to PSLF, your risk tolerance. There's a whole lot that goes into it. So that's an annoying answer, but, sometimes it depends is the most honest answer. So let's take another question.
Hey group, thanks so much for your content. You're really making a difference in people's lives, mine included. My question is that when I log on to federal student aid, I don't have any information under loans. I can see on my dashboard that I have my big chunk of loans, but when I click into the loans and look for things like my payment count, nothing is there. And I'm wondering if that's related to being under the servicer MOHELA. We know how problematic they've been. If you could please give me some insight on that, that'd be awesome. Thanks, group.
So honestly, sometimes I'm stumped. I'm not sure why this is occurring. I think that, I would probably be patient. I would probably try to, it's probably a waste of time to call, but you might call and ask. If you don't have any payment history on FSA, I would probably submit a request to the Ombudsman of Department of Ed. So I'd probably send an email to Ombudsman, the Ombudsman email. Let me see if I can remember that off the top of my head. I think it is ombudsman@ed.gov. That's the email. And that's if you have no history at all showing on your FSA. If you have no history at all showing on your MOHELA, your Nelnet, or whatever servicer that you're with, I probably wouldn't worry quite as much about that. The FSA stuff is going to be what's going to determine all the official, kind of policies about when you're going to get forgiveness and all those sorts of things. So I would probably reach out to that group. I think there's also a phone number that you can call. I believe it's 1-800-557-7394. That is a student loan support center. I remember we had a lot of problems back in the day with people that were dealing with this Fed loan problem, where Fed loan never built it into the logic that a loan could have more than $100,000 of accrued interest. And so people that were getting over $100,000 of accrued interest, Fed loan took it upon themselves to split the loan in two. But the problem is they never told Department of Ed. And so Department of Ed was showing half of people's balance instead of all of it. And Fed loan was showing all of it. And it was just this embarrassing problem that just, it was almost kind of like a Y2K bug. They never anticipated the year 2000, right? It's pretty similar. And so we just had to have people reach out to the Federal Student Aid Support Center and escalate things, and to make sure that the records were right on FSA, because if the records are not right on FSA, then there's a good chance that they'll mess it up for the future if you ever got forgiveness. So really weird problem. I'm sorry you're going through that, listener, but that would be my suggestion is reach out to that Ombudsman email or reach out to the Student Loan Support Center. So let's take a few more here.
Hi, Travis. Thank you so much for your very informational podcast. I discovered it about a year ago, and it's been really helpful for me as I navigate the very convoluted landscape of student loans. My situation is that I'm in a graduate school program. I'm reliant 100% on Grad PLUS loans because I've maxed out the regular subsidized and unsubsidized loans. So my question and my anxieties right now are centered around whether or not Grad PLUS loans are going to remain available throughout the Trump administration. There has been talk that they could go away. And so I have two questions on that. The first is, could he eliminate them through an executive order, or would this be something that would have to go through Congress? and legislation through Congress. And I'm curious, if so, what the anticipated time frame might be for that. The second question is, if worst case scenario for me happens and the Grad Plus loans are eliminated, would that take effect right away? And how might that impact students who are currently in the middle of a program and taking out Grad Plus loans? Like, I don't think I'd be able to finish my program, so it causes me a lot of anxiety and stress. So just curious about the answers to those questions. Thank you so much.
So the current proposal on the table from House Republicans is that they would phase out the Grad Plus program starting in 2025, and that it would be fully phased out in 2028. And the Prosper Act in 2017 that was proposed, so it was another sort of party line proposal to eliminate Grad Plus. What they said in that bill was anybody who is enrolled in a graduate program as of a certain date would retain access to Grad Plus, and then the Grad Plus loans would be fully gone by the time somebody was finished with their program. Now, the new language they're suggesting is, fully phasing it out in 2028. I think that's probably because, obviously President Trump would no longer be in power in 2028. So they probably want to make sure they try to phase out the Grad Plus program in full before the end of his term. So that's my guess on that. But, I would take some comfort, first of all, that the Grad Plus elimination would have to be legislative. It can't be done through executive order. Grad Plus is in the law. It was a law passed in around 2006 timeframe. So Grad Plus and Parent Plus, they are in the law. The uncapped borrowing of those programs are in the law. And you'd have to wait and see for legislation with the budget reconciliation bill that the Republicans are going to come out with in the late spring, probably. And I do think that there is more momentum behind capping and eliminating Grad Plus and Parent Plus than there ever has been before. But keep in mind that these proposals are pre-contact with lobbyists. And what I mean by that is this would have a really negative impact on borrowers that are in programs that cost a lot of money, but it would also have a far more negative impact, frankly, on universities that depend on this money to fill their budgets. And we last time saw this proposal defeated by a very interesting political coalition of big famous schools with big football programs combined with HBCUs. So that was the coalition that defeated this when it was proposed in the Obama administration. You had sort of the big football schools hitting up, a lot of more Republican senators. You had a lot of HBCUs heading up more, Obama administration officials and such. And this diverse coalition of university interest groups blocked the elimination of the Grad Plus and Parent Plus programs. It was actually proposed by President Obama in some capacity at least. And so, I think that if I was in a program already, I'd feel very comfortable knowing that Grad Plus is going to stick around till the end of it. With the exception of anybody who, is maybe in their very first year of their program, there's a chance that maybe it gets eliminated in 2028. If that were to happen, I would anticipate the universities would use some creative accounting to try to make sure that people borrow all the Grad Plus loans a little bit early before the program is shut down, because they'd have a very strong interest in doing so. So, I would only worry about Grad Plus loans going away, in my mind, if you were not enrolled in a program yet, but you'd like to be. So if you want to be enrolled in a program, I think that, I don't think they're going to pass a budget reconciliation bill with lightning speed. So I would anticipate maybe the cutoff date could be programs that start this fall might be cut off from Grad Plus for the future, but maybe they won't be. Maybe the programs this fall would be the last programs that'd be eligible for them. And I think that if you were to see a July 2025 end date for Grad Plus, new Grad Plus borrowers are not already enrolled in a program, frankly, what all the super expensive dental schools in the Northeast would do and other programs like it, I think they would just enroll people June 27th, right? So I think that there'll be a lot of workarounds for whenever they do something with Grad Plus, if they do it at all, because they only have a 3-seat House majority. So let's take a few more questions.
Hi, Travis. My name is Sam in Houston. Thank you for all the work you've done. I have 2 questions. The first is that you've spoken a lot about what the Trump administration can or cannot do to affect student loans, but what comments do you have about what the DOGE could do? I'm increasingly concerned that they are going to prevent or change access to PSLF or IDR forgiveness, things like that. The second question is that I've tried to contact MOHEWA through email and phone several times to discuss switching from an administrative to a processing forbearance, as I submitted an IDR application a month or two ago to switch off of SAVE to old IBR. And I keep getting stock replies that don't answer my question and are more confusing than helpful. And no one has really addressed this point. I know that it's up to the servicer to do so, but can we influence this in any way? And what suggestions do you have if we're not actually getting answers to continue to try to push for qualifying payments for PSLF? Thank you.
I love our listeners because y'all always ask really good questions. So I think that the DOGE piece of things, I think that they've already cut about $1 billion from Department of Ed from like research activities, which is not technically its core function. So that's their first assault on it. Also ending, any programs or, putting any employees involved in DEI efforts at Department of Ed on administrative forbearance. Look at my brain not functioning. Administrative leave, Freudian slip there, guys. So I think that the thought process on DOGE and what they could do. So keep in mind that they will try to target something in Department of Ed, and it might take time. And there's actually a lawsuit trying to slow them down. The California, I think it's like Student Association for Higher Education, universities in California. They filed a lawsuit trying to block DOGE's access to the federal student loan system and borrower information, citing privacy concerns that they didn't want DOGE accessing their private information. This is it's hard to know what your strategy should be if you were trying to stop DOGE from finding a lot of stuff out about the student loan system, because it's sort of like it's sort of like by trying to slow down their access, it almost makes them want to look at it more, if that makes sense. Now, obviously, if you want to stop their access, then you can't not do anything, I guess. So I'm not really sure about the strategy behind it, but I just know that that's a lawsuit that's been going on where they've tried to slow down access from DOGE to the student loan data. I think, though, that they're going to log in and they're going to find some things that are going to be pretty shocking, and it's not that hard to think through what they would find, right? I think that they would look at the student loan data, they would look at the total volume, they would look at how many people are in forbearance, they would look at the interest pause with save plan forbearance, they would look at how many people are making payments and what the payments are. I think that they're going to see that a huge number of people have a very small payment, right? That the people have not recertified in several years in many cases because of the COVID pause and the Biden policies of extending the IDR recertification date. So in terms of what DOGE could do to student loans, I think that the most, the biggest impact, I think, frankly, would just be forcing IDR recertification really early, possibly forcing a lot of people off the save plan forbearance, forcing people into IBR, something along those lines. I think that they could also, try to put a pause on some of the changes to PSLF that President Biden made. Some of the things like making PSLF definitions a little bit more flexible, for example. Maybe they try to order a halt, maybe a temporary halt to, PSLF processing while they redo some of the eligibility rules around the edges. So, for example, maybe it's going back to the employer definition of full time instead of the 30 hours a week requirement, for example. But this is all speculative. I mean, with the DOGE stuff, I think the issue is nobody truly knows. This is all a very uncertain period, and so we just have to stay tuned. But know that the reason why, from my understanding, that they were able to so quickly attack USAID was because it was created via an executive order. Not an expert on USAID. Just want to have that disclosure out there. But that's my understanding is, well, if you create something via an executive order, you can undo it with an executive order. And, even that is held up in the courts, right? So I think with Department of Ed, the good news for borrowers that are worried would be that Department of Ed stuff is way more in the statute than, something like USAID is. And you might say, well, the CFPB is in the statute, and look what they did to the CFPB. Well, the CFPB simply says something around the lines of, well, the director of the CFPB can basically just draw on funds from the Federal Reserve kind of whenever it wants. And so their theory is, well, that means that they can undraw on funds from the Federal Reserve whenever they want, and that means they can just refund all the money that funds the CFPB. Since Congress doesn't fund it directly, well, therefore, there's no money to operate the CFPB. So yes, they will try to look for loopholes like that to try to apply things to Department of Ed. But I think that, when it says 35 times that the Secretary of Education shall offer income-driven repayment programs, and they define, IBR explicitly as a very specific type of repayment plan, there's not as much wiggle room there for them to, try to impact things. As to the second question about what can you do, having asked for a processing forbearance to try to switch plans. So the processing forbearance, keep in mind, that's at the complete discretion of the servicer. The servicer can do whatever it wants there. And it's up to 60 days on the processing forbearance, which means if they wanted to make it shorter, they could. And the processing forbearance counting for PSLF and IDR, that's also a Biden administration rule. That's not in the statute. So this is something that if Trump wanted to, pause, things for a little bit to undo that over a process of months, he could, right? So I think that, kind of being uncomfortable with uncertainty is the only path here. If you know that you want to get onto IBR, studentaid.gov/IDR, and then make sure you apply in the manage repayment section. And then you also have to specifically state you want to be on the IBR plan and not the one that says let my servicer choose. I think anybody who's selecting let my servicer choose on their IDR plans right now is just sort of choosing to be in purgatory, because from my understanding, the servicers are not even processing those. They're just only processing ones where people explicitly state what plan they want to be on. I've also seen some problems with people applying for pay who essentially, like, they don't get their forms processed in a minimum amount of time, and then they get switched over to a processing forbearance while they're waiting, and then they get switched into some sort of additional administrative forbearance after they haven't finished processing the pay forms. So I think all the servicers are just kind of hoping for some sort of court ruling or executive order to get more clarity as to what they should be doing with their job. I think Department of Ed staff, the new administration hasn't fully staffed it up yet. We still don't have a Secretary of Education. So, you kind of have to have all those people in their seats confirmed to start telling the servicers what to do for us to really see any action here. Keep in mind, the servicers really do look to the FSA group and say, what do we do? What do you want us to do? And they're looking for direction from Department of Ed. And right now, of course, the Department of Ed is just chaos. There isn't, anybody really making decisions over there. So you have to have actual decision makers to see any movement in a lot of this stuff. So let's take one more question.
Hello, I'm an engineer, and my wife is a public school teacher with about 6 out of 10 years of qualifying payments for PSLF. She's in the PAYE program, and we file taxes separately. If she takes a few years off from working to have children and we continue to file taxes separately, can she remain on the PAYE repayment plan indefinitely? Can she continue to file a tax return as married filing separate, even with no income, for income verification purposes? And would her payments go to zero as long as her married filing separate tax return shows no income? I understand she wouldn't be earning qualifying payments until she returns to having qualifying employment, but I want to make sure my income will never affect her monthly payments. Her payments are currently zero per month while making qualifying payments, which is why we never signed up for the SAVE plan. But we expect that to change soon with the upcoming income verification deadline in a few months.
So the answer to this one is a simple yes. You can remain on the pay program indefinitely if you are not working. You just have to make sure that you continue filing your IDR recertification when you're asked for it. And, if you are not getting any credit towards PSLF, I think the question would be, how sure are you that, that she would go back to full-time work in the not-for-profit or government sector, right? Because if you were positive that she would be going back, well, then she could just decide, well, I just want to use forbearance instead to not have to take that big tax hit, which it will be a temporary hit. When you file separate, you can amend your old returns up to 3 years in the past and get any excess taxes you paid for filing separate return due. But that's a little bit of a process. It takes a while. Most people would be paying some professional services fees to a tax preparer to do that amendment for them. And so depending on what your income is, let's say you have a $200,000 income and, she has a $0 income, that could be a pretty substantial several $1,000s penalty. So the question would be, do you have the stomach for it? Do you want to do that? Is this really like probably 2 or 3 years taking off, or is it longer than that? And then, if it's longer, then it might as well stay on the pay plan and just try to continue building credit towards 20-year forgiveness, just in case, she decides to, go back to work part-time, or maybe in the private sector, or, doesn't end up in a job that gives her credit that actually results in like the PSLF type forgiveness. So that's a good question. We're going to transition here to now talking about just the Trump/Musk battle over Department of Ed and just some thoughts that I have about it. Keep in mind these, recordings that you heard were all people that went to studentloanplanner.com/voicemail. So if you want to ask your own question about something chaotic happening with student loans, just go to studentloanplanner.com/voicemail, and we'd be happy to answer your question live on one of our future podcast episodes. So studentloanplanner.com/voicemail. Now let's transition to talking about the Trump-Musk DOGE war over Department of Ed. Okay, so if you have the world's richest person sending people over to Department of Ed combing through their data files, and that's been a focus of theirs for a while, and they have people embedded at the top floor of Department of Ed, and you had House Democrats march over to the front door of Department of Ed, demanding to be allowed to enter to have a meeting to discuss their concerns about Department of Ed being dismantled. All of those things understandably create concern and worry and anxiety, right? So, I do think that history matters here. Department of Ed, they tried to abolish it in the Reagan administration. They failed to do so. The Higher Education Act talks a lot about the Secretary of Education, especially with the amendments that have been done since then, right? That's all the amendments to the Higher Education Act put in, the Secretary of Education shall. And when you think about the student loan program, the student loan management of everything with the Department of Ed, they can't just move that to the Treasury Department or some other department without some sort of legislative approval, and it would have to be some sort of, probably have to have bipartisan support. I say probably because everything seems so uncertain these days, but it certainly to me seems like, moving student loans to a new outside agency or something like that is just not on the cards. Now, I like to really think about the politics of stuff when I'm thinking about how likely something is to happen, right? So I don't know if you guys have seen the stuff about the NIH funding, the grant funding getting, maybe indirect costs getting slashed, right? That's creating all this worry in the university community. My wife applies for a lot of these grants, sort of as a full disclosure. So she's really worried about a lot of this stuff. A lot of our readers and listeners are, researchers or have, either applying for research grants themselves or know people who are. So there's a lot of worry about that. And what did you see in the media when we started seeing, a lot of the talk about cutting back on these programs? One of the people that spoke up was Senator, I believe, Britt from, I think that's her name, from Alabama. She was the person chosen to deliver the response to the State of the Union that was sort of, you could say, mocked by Scarlett Johansson and SNL, if you remember that one. So she's a very much a member of the, MAGA coalition. And, she was expressing, extreme concern over University of Alabama at Birmingham because UAB is one of the top recipients of these types of NIH grants and research grants that fund a ton of research and, top professionals in that community, in that hospital system. And she's speaking up for continued funding for that. So I think that what we're hearing right now is the honeymoon period where, sure, let's just take a wrecking ball at all these things, right? But what we have not really seen yet is any of the political pushback. And that's really the context that I wanted to encourage people to think about. So a lot of these, slashes or reversals, whatever, again, they're going after programs that they can go after with executive orders because it's potentially legal to go after them with executive orders. For the things that they can't fully end via executive order, they're trying to put on funding freezes and halts to spending, right? But notice that they can't stop it permanently, right? So I want to be thinking about the context of all these different things. Let's say that they issued a order halting all PSLF application reviews tomorrow. Should you panic? The answer would be no, because they can't do it permanently. At most, I think they would be able to do it for maybe a couple months if they even tried to do something like that, which I don't think they will. And, why is that? It's because when you have a House majority that's 3 seats, you have a lot of frontline members in moderate swing districts that are very concerned about winning re-election, like any politician would be. And, if you think about, behavior of politicians in swing districts that are worried about re-election, what do? They prioritize their local interests when they have the ability to do so. And I think that there's a lot of universities out there, a lot of hospital systems out there that, you might hear publicly there's a wrecking ball going to NIH or Department of Ed or whatever place, but like behind the scenes, these local representatives of different interest groups are going to be fighting fiercely for their institutions to not be affected. And that's why I would not be super concerned yet about what's happening with Department of Ed, with DOGE, and other things. I think that that's relevant to think about. Now, I think that there will be changes. There's no question in my mind there will be changes, right? If, we had, the reversal of the PSLF rules back to what they were before. If we had, IBR is the only payment option. If we had, slower processing of loan forgiveness, or auditing of people's income information, right? I mean, I think a lot of these things that could bite people are just like things that are written into the rules. So, for example, if you have an S corp, right, you have to include all sources of taxable income when you recertify your student loans. The easiest way to do this is if you're a business owner, is just to give people the tax returns. That reflects your AGI. You don't have to have any question marks about that, right? Where I think people could get in trouble would be if, you only provide pay stubs when you have, 6 figures of income from your K1 and your, dividends and your interest from your investments, right? The interesting thing to know about what the Biden administration did is they removed language on the IDR application stating that all sources of taxable income had to be accounted for in the recertification, but then they didn't remove it on the paper form. So if you want to talk about just ridiculous management of the student loan system, that's mixed messaging. On the online application, they just say, you can recertify using, and I'm not making this up, they said, your pay stub, but then they said things like a letter from your employer, a bank account statement, like, smoke signals from a pigeon from the World War I era. I mean, I'm joking about that last one, but it was really kind of like the Biden administration saying, we don't give a bleep about, recertifying income. We just want it to be as easy as possible so that everybody can get into IBR more easily. And, if some high income physicians get a really low payment that they shouldn't get because we make it super easy to recertify income, we don't really care. That's really the Biden administration's position on income recertification. They kept pushing it off and off and off and never, ever required people to recertify their incomes simply because they didn't want people's payments to go up before the election. Makes sense politically, right? Trump administration, do they have that same concern? No, he's not up for re-election again. And I think that they, in general, view like higher education as sort of part of the political opposition overall, right? Which is why I think that you also see, them going after places like USAID, CFPB, Department of Ed. They're going after those kinds of places first because that's sort of like the low-hanging fruit and the highest percentage of people that probably in their minds are not part of the political coalition. So it's easier to go after those groups. But then you get this back channel influence campaign from people with specific interest groups they represent, like Senator Britt of Alabama fighting for UAB and other places like that around the country. And then everything gets moderated and made a lot less, a lot less of a change. That's just politics, right? How stuff kind of tends to work. So it's kind of like a long explanation of, do I think that we're going to see changes with DOGE and stuff? Yeah, sure, I do. I think that recertifying income is one of the first changes I expect they'll make at some point. I expect ending the SAVE plan, forcing people onto some other repayment plan is one of the big changes we'll see coming at some point. That also could happen from, the federal lawsuit that still hasn't been ruled on yet. So hopefully that helps. I know this is an uncertain time, and just keep in mind that if you're in the SAVE forbearance getting 0%, you're not losing ground in the sense of the loans at least not growing. And in terms of your payments, like for the future and counting for PSLF, well, hopefully you like your job and you'd be doing your work anyway, regardless of PSLF. If that's not the case, if it's not true, then you need a plan for not doing your job and still handling your student loans in a responsible, good way, which is a very common reason people book consults for us, is because they want to leave their not-for-profit or government job, but they don't want to wait around for PSLF, and they need a plan for that. That's actually a pretty doable plan. You just have to think through implications of forgiveness in the private sector. And some people, want to get PSLF, but they want to get it as fast as possible because they want to have more options around their employment being full-time, or, switching careers if they want to, etc. So I know it's a stressful time. If you want to relieve some of that stress, one great way is by asking questions that we can feature on this podcast. So if you go to, again, studentloanplanner.com/voicemail, ask your questions. We know that this is a scary time, but it's a time that we can hopefully help a lot of our community have lower stress and lower anxiety and more happiness in their lives. So thank you so much for listening to the Student Loan Planner podcast. Until next time, I'm Travis. Have a great rest of your week.